I never thought I'd feel like a teenager again at 38. But as I stood in front of the gymnasium doors of our old high school, I could feel my palms sweating just like they had before prom night all those years ago. It was just a reunion, just nostalgia, I told myself. But something about that place still hummed with energy, like a memory trying to push itself back into the present. "Come on," my wife Lisa said beside me, nudging me playfully with her shoulder. "You're not seriously nervous, are you?" "No," I lied, grinning. "Just trying to remember if I wore this same suit to graduation." She looked stunning, and she knew it. A tight, crimson dress that hugged her curves like a lover, soft curls resting on her shoulders, and just enough perfume to make me glance over at her every few minutes like a high school kid all over again. Lisa had always been the one who lit up a room when she walked in. That night was no different. We stepped inside, greeted by a wave of loud chatter, familiar music from the early 2000s, and the smell of catered finger food. Tables decorated with glittering centerpieces lined the gym, and faces I hadn't seen in 20 years turned toward us, some lighting up in recognition, others squinting through the fog of memory. Lisa was immediately pulled into a circle of women squealing over old yearbook photos and laughing like no time had passed. I grabbed a drink, shook a few hands, and eventually found my way to a quiet corner. That's when I saw him. Jake Mercer. The name hit me before the face did. He was taller now, broader, but that same devil-may-care smirk curved his lips. He was leaning against the refreshment table, holding a glass of wine like it was a stage prop, and wearing a suit that was probably twice as expensive as mine. And Lisa, my Lisa, was walking straight toward him. Something in me paused. "Jake Mercer," she said, a smile blooming on her lips, brighter than I expected. "I didn't know you were coming." He turned, and for a second, I watched her body language change. She did that thing, tilted her head to the side, touched his arm lightly, laughed a bit louder than usual. Jake's eyes slid over her with a look I recognized too well. Confident, assessing, just shy of predatory. I stepped closer, but didn't interrupt. I told myself it was nothing. They dated in high school, big deal. Everyone dated someone back then. First loves rarely last, right? But there was a spark. I could feel it from across the room like static before a storm. Jake leaned in to whisper something, and Lisa laughed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear the way she always did when she was flattered. Her body leaned in just slightly. Nothing overt. Nothing that screamed danger. But intimate. My gut twisted. A guy from my old football team clapped me on the back, dragging me into a quick catch-up conversation about careers and kids. I answered on autopilot, eyes flicking back to Lisa every few seconds. She was still with Jake, still smiling, still leaning in. Eventually, she looked over, caught my eye, and waved me over. I smiled, forced myself to look relaxed. "Babe," she said, looping her arm through mine. "You remember Jake, right?" "Of course," I said, offering my hand. His grip was firm, too firm. "Lucky bastard," Jake said, flashing a grin at me, then back to Lisa. "She hasn't changed a bit." I chuckled, but something burned behind my smile. Lisa blushed. "Neither have you," she said. "The hell he hasn't," I thought. He'd filled out, gotten sharper with age. That kind of confidence doesn't come from gym reps or grooming. It comes from a man who knows women still want him. I watched them talk, their laughter just a little too effortless. Later that night, after the dinner and the speeches and the group photos, I found Lisa standing by the bleachers with Jake again, just the two of them. The lights had dimmed for the dance, couple swaying to some slow song that hadn't been popular since senior year. I watched from a distance. They were close. Close enough that his hand brushed her waist, and she didn't move. Close enough that their heads bent toward each other, voices low, faces too serious for casual chatter. My stomach clenched. When I finally walked over, Lisa turned quickly, a little startled. Jake just grinned. "Ready to go?" I asked, my voice casual. "Yeah," she said, brushing invisible dust off her dress. "Just catching up." "Good seeing you, man," Jake said, clapping my shoulder. "Yeah," I replied, not meeting his eyes. The car ride home was filled with light conversation about who'd aged best, who'd aged worst, who had too many drinks. I pretended not to notice the faint glow in her cheeks or how often she smiled to herself. When we got home, she changed into her pajamas without a word, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "That was fun." I stared at the ceiling that night, something uneasy gnawing at the edge of my thoughts. It was probably harmless. Probably just old memories, harmless flirting, nostalgia. But something about the way she smiled at her phone the next morning. Something told me this story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It started with a password. Or more precisely, the sudden need for one. Lisa had never locked her phone before, not in 16 years of being together. It would sit face up on the counter, lighting up with texts from her mom, notifications from her Pinterest boards, or the occasional "Hey babe" from me when I was bored at work. But 2 days after the reunion, it was face down. Every time. And by the third day, there was a new lock screen. Not just a thumbprint, but a full-on alphanumeric code. I only found out because I picked up her phone to silence it during dinner, and the screen asked for a passcode. She noticed instantly, snapping her head up from her salad like a guard dog. "Hey," she said, her voice lighter than usual. "I got a bunch of work stuff on there, just trying to keep students from messing with it." Right. Lisa taught high school English. Teenagers could be curious, sure, but that excuse tasted like sour wine. Thin. Off. I let it go for the moment. But once you see a crack in the glass, you can't help but stare. The next few days were a series of little oddities. Her phone was always with her, even when she went to the bathroom. She smiled at it more than usual. She started wearing makeup on Sundays, even when we weren't going anywhere. She laughed at messages I wasn't part of. One night, she came out of the shower wrapped in a towel, humming to herself. She didn't know I was standing in the hallway. She stopped humming when her phone buzzed, checked it, and smiled that kind of private smile people save for secrets. Then she typed back quickly, still dripping water onto the tile. "Who was that?" I asked, startling her. She clutched the towel tighter. "Just Molly from work." Didn't sound like a Molly smile. I said before I could stop myself. She laughed it off. But I saw the flicker of tension in her neck, the way her shoulders stiffened slightly before she turned away. I saw all of it. I wasn't the jealous type. At least, I didn't think I was. But jealousy isn't a sudden fire. It's a slow rot, something that builds quietly, in the silence between words, and the way someone pulls their hand away a little faster than usual. On a Wednesday night, after she fell asleep, I stayed up in bed scrolling aimlessly. Something kept nagging at me. The way she clutched her phone. The way she always seemed to smile when a text came through. A smile she hadn't used on me in months. I opened my laptop, still warm from earlier. I hadn't done anything like this before. Never needed to. But now I Googled phrases like how to recover iMessages from iCloud and how to mirror someone's phone. My conscience battled with me. I was invading her privacy. But wasn't she invading something deeper? Our life? Our trust? Eventually, I figured it out. I accessed her old iPad from our closet, forgotten and untouched for almost a year. It still had her Apple ID logged in. When I turned it on, synced it to Wi-Fi, and opened up her iMessage app, I saw everything. The first name that popped up? Jake Mercer. It felt like someone had cracked my ribs open with a crowbar. The messages were mostly from the last 10 days, since the reunion, but there were hundreds of them. Flirty at first. Harmless banter about how wild it was to see each other again, then slowly escalating. "Jake, you looked better than I remember. Still can't believe you married that quiet guy." "Lisa, he's not that quiet. Just more reserved." "Jake, so you're saying he wouldn't tear your dress off if I dared him to?" "Lisa, LOL. Stop it. You're so bad." "Jake, you didn't say no. It got worse. Much worse." They joked about old times. About the way he used to sneak into her bedroom when her parents were asleep. About that one night behind the football bleachers. And then, the bomb dropped. "Jake, I'll be in town next week. Drinks?" "Lisa, I'll have to be careful. But I want to." "Jake, want to finish what we started at the reunion?" I sat there numb. It wasn't just sexting. It wasn't just flirting. It was a door she was opening willingly. A part of herself she had closed off to me for months, now cracked wide open for someone else. I read through the entire thread, my stomach turning over like it had swallowed concrete. I wasn't even angry at first. Not yet. Just hollow. How long had she been waiting for a spark like this? How long had I been just invisible? The worst part was that there was no smoking gun yet. No confirmation that they'd actually had sex. But I could feel it brewing. You don't write things like, "You still know how to get under my skin," or "You remember that thing you used to do with your tongue?" unless you're already halfway down the road. The next morning, I didn't say a word. I kissed her cheek like usual, packed my lunch, and went to work. I was in survival mode. But something inside me had changed. Something irreversible. The Lisa I'd married, the one who once left sticky notes in my briefcase and wore my t-shirts around the house, was now a stranger with secrets. A stranger who was texting her high school ex behind my back. A stranger who was planning to meet him for drinks. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Not Lisa. Her. The woman in the background of Jake Mercer's profile picture. It had started as idle curiosity. After reading the messages between Lisa and Jake, I needed to put a face to the man who had invaded my marriage like a wrecking ball. So I searched for him. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I knew he'd be there. Guys like Jake didn't fade into obscurity. They lingered, aging well, riding the wave of their teenage charm like it was a surfboard made of gold. Sure enough, there he was. Jake Mercer. Still flashing that smug, sideways grin. Still showing off a half-button dress shirt like it was 2004. Only now, the beach beer and muscle cars had been replaced by boutique bourbon and photos of ski trips in Aspen. But what caught me wasn't him. It was her. In half a dozen posts, she stood beside him. Sometimes smiling, sometimes half-heartedly, like she was aware of the camera but not the moment. Long brunette hair, sharp cheekbones, eyes that held a kind of knowing sadness. You could tell she was someone who once believed in love. Someone who still tried to hold it together. One caption read, 12 years married today. Still can't believe how fast time flies. Here's to more laughs, less laundry, and maybe fewer meetings, Jake. 12 years. Married. Jake was married. I stared at the caption, my stomach dropping as something clicked hard inside my chest. I zoomed in on her face, trying to shake the ghost of familiarity tickling the edges of my memory. There was something about her eyes. The shape. The expression, like a whisper from the past. And then it hit me. Her name was Emily Carson. Before she was Emily Mercer, she was the girl I used to sit next to in 11th grade chemistry. The one who smelled like vanilla and pencil shavings. The one I was supposed to ask to prom, but never did. We shared notes. We swapped playlists. I gave her a mixtape once, and she smiled like I'd handed her diamonds. We were something that almost happened, and then didn't. I hadn't thought about her in years. Now, suddenly, she was back, married to the same man who was trying to fuck my wife. The irony left a sour taste in my mouth. I didn't do anything for a few days. I couldn't. I was still reeling from what Lisa had done, or what she was about to do. There hadn't been any new messages between her and Jake since that night, but I'd memorized every word of their last exchange. Jake, next Thursday. That wine bar you used to like, on Spring Street? Lisa, 7 p.m. I'll come straight from tutoring, winking face. I kept rereading that little winking emoji like it was a gun pressed to my chest. Tutoring was the code, a lie she'd already rehearsed. Thursday was coming. Fast. By Wednesday, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to confront Lisa yet. No dramatic outburst. No screaming match. Not yet. I needed more than fury. I needed leverage. And that meant talking to Emily. It felt crazy at first, insane, even. What was I going to do? Slide into her DMs like some sad, betrayed loser? Tell her that her husband was trying to rekindle old sexcapades with my wife? But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. We were the only two people in the world who could understand this particular betrayal. We were on the same island, exiled by the same storm. So I did it. Wednesday night, I typed the message. Me. Hey, this is going to sound incredibly strange, but I think we should talk. It's about your husband and my wife. I stared at it for almost 5 minutes before hitting send. She replied 20 minutes later. Emily, you're Alex, right? From Ridgeview High? My breath caught in my throat. Me. Yeah, I didn't think you'd remember. Emily. Of course I do. You once gave me a Pearl Jam CD and told me it would change my life. Still have it. Even in the middle of this absolute train wreck of a situation, I smiled. But then she followed up. Emily. Now, tell me what the hell is going on. I didn't hold back. I told her everything. About the reunion, the messages, the upcoming Thursday night meetup. I sent her screenshots. Redacted some parts, but the core of it was all there. She didn't respond for several minutes. When she did, her answer was short, cold, and brutal. Emily, thank you. That bastard is going to regret this. I didn't hear from her again that night. But I didn't need to. Something was happening now. The lie wasn't just exposed. It had company. And tomorrow, Thursday night, it would all come to a head. I didn't know if Emily planned to confront Jake. I didn't know if she'd show up at the wine bar, or ambush him at home, or burn his wardrobe in the driveway. All I knew was that whatever came next, I wasn't alone. Lisa wasn't just cheating on me. Jake was cheating on her. We were two halves of a betrayal twisted into one bitter knot. And somehow, I felt strangely closer to Emily now than I had to Lisa in months. I couldn't explain it, but I knew I needed to see her. It was like waiting for a storm that might not come. All Thursday, I moved through my day like a man underwater. I answered emails, took conference calls, smiled through a lunch with my project team. On the surface, everything looked normal, but my mind was locked on one thing. 7 p.m., Spring Street. The wine bar. I knew Lisa would be there. I saw her pack her bag that morning, slipping on perfume she never wore to school, choosing heels that made no sense for standing in front of a classroom. When I kissed her goodbye, she kissed back, but it was distracted, absent. Her eyes were already somewhere else. She didn't say what time she'd be back. I didn't ask. By 6:45 p.m., I was parked a block away from the wine bar. My hands gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. I told myself I wasn't here to spy, but that was a lie. I needed to know. I needed to see it. I had no idea if Emily would show. The last I heard from her was a single message earlier that afternoon. Emily, if you're going to be there, I want to talk. Don't leave until we've spoken. That was it. At 7:03, I saw Lisa arrive. Her silhouette was instantly recognizable. Tall, confident, hair pulled back in the loose wave she always wore when she wanted to look effortlessly sexy. She paused at the door, glanced at her reflection in the window, and smiled at herself before going in. 2 minutes later, Jake showed up. He hadn't changed since the reunion. Same smug grin. Same cocky strut. He walked in like the place belonged to him. I couldn't see them from where I was parked, but I didn't need to. I knew how that conversation would go. Flirty at first, then the slow, subtle escalation. A hand on hers. A shared laugh. Maybe they'd skip the next drink and head somewhere more private. I didn't want to imagine it, but my brain offered it anyway, like some cruel slideshow behind my eyelids. At 7:20, a knock on my passenger window startled me out of the spiral. I turned, and there she was. Emily. She wore a dark blue coat, her hair down and straight. No makeup except a slash of red across her lips that made her look both composed and dangerous. Her expression was unreadable. I unlocked the door. She slid in without a word. For a full 10 seconds, we just sat there, the silence pressing in like fog. You really came? I said finally. I had to, she replied, voice quiet but controlled. I needed to see the man my husband's trying to fuck over. Her tone was sharp, but not hostile. Just edged. I'm sorry, I said, for how you had to find out. She exhaled, fingers knotting in her lap. I knew something was off. He's been distant for months. I thought it was work stress. Midlife crisis. Maybe he was secretly buying a motorcycle or some stupid gadget. I didn't think. She broke off, blinking quickly. I didn't think he'd do this. I looked over at her. I get it. Same here. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. And the cherry on top? Your wife. I remember her. You do? Lisa. Back in school. She was always confident, smart, pretty, but always so polished. The kind of girl who smiled while slowly unscrewing your head. I gave a small, bitter smile. Sounds about right. Another pause. Emily stared out the windshield, toward the dim glow of the wine bar. I almost didn't come, she said softly. I didn't want to know. Not for sure. Me neither. But now that I'm here, she glanced at me, eyes shining with something I couldn't name. It's oddly comforting. To not be the only one. I nodded. Yeah, that's the weirdest part, right? You spend days, weeks, maybe longer, feeling alone. Like it's just you unraveling. Then someone else says, hey, me too. And it all cracks open. I didn't even cry, she whispered. When I read your message, saw the screenshots. I thought I'd fall apart. But I didn't. Just felt hollow. I looked down at my hands. I wanted to hit something. I wanted to scream. But it was like the anger just evaporated, replaced by this cold clarity. She turned toward me more fully now, her expression softening. So what now? I don't know, I admitted. I didn't think past this moment. Well, we could go in there. Blow it all up. The suggestion hung between us like smoke. Could, I agreed. But what's the point? She added, her voice growing steadier. They'll just deny it. Or turn it back on us. Say we're overreacting. That nothing happened. That it's all in our heads. They haven't slept together yet, I said, realizing it was probably true. But they want to. Badly. That's enough, Emily replied. Intent counts. We sat in silence again. Then I said, do you want to get out of here? She turned to me slowly. With you? I mean, yeah. I don't want to sit here all night. And you don't either. There's a bar down the street. Divey. Quiet. No wine lists. Just beer and reality. For a second, I thought she might say no. But then she nodded. Yeah, I could use reality. We got out, walking side by side under the streetlights, the sound of our shoes on the pavement a strange kind of rhythm. I didn't touch her. She didn't touch me. But the space between us, it hummed. And as we turned the corner, leaving behind the wine bar and the betrayal glowing inside it, I realized something I hadn't dared to admit. It felt good to be seen again. Really seen. Not as a husband. Not as a victim. But as a man. A person. Someone who hadn't been completely erased. And walking beside me was the only other person in the world who understood exactly how that felt. The dive bar we found wasn't anything special. Dimly lit. Wood-paneled walls. Neon signs advertising beers neither of us wanted. But there was a comfort to it. A kind of anonymity we both needed. No white tablecloths. No wine flights. Just chipped stools and the soft clink of glass behind the counter. We sat in a booth tucked near the back. The waitress, clearly overworked and underpaid, didn't ask questions when we each ordered a double bourbon on the rocks. She just nodded and disappeared. For a moment, we didn't say anything. We just sat there, the gravity of what we'd seen, what we'd felt, settling between us. Emily was the first to speak. Did you ever cheat on her? I looked up. Her expression was unreadable. Not judgmental, just curious. No, I said. Never. Came close once, years ago. Some coworker got a little too friendly after happy hour. But I stopped it. Thought about how I'd feel if Lisa did that to me. She nodded slowly. Same. You never cheated on Jake? Her jaw tensed. No, but I think I checked out long before he did. Maybe that's the same thing, in a different form. I didn't respond. Just swirled the ice in my glass, watching it melt around the amber. I used to be different, she continued. You remember high school? God, I was such a dreamer. Thought love was poetry and mixtapes, and lying in the grass counting stars. I smiled faintly. You were always writing in your notebook. Yeah, poems, lyrics, stupid things. Not stupid, I said. She looked at me, surprised. You remember that? I nodded. You always sat 2 seats to the left of me in chemistry. Wrote in the margins of your notes. I always wanted to ask you what you were writing, but I figured it wasn't my place. I wish you had, she said, her voice quieter now. I used to wonder if you noticed. I did, I said. I noticed everything. She stared at me for a long moment, then took a sip of her drink. Crazy how the people you never dated end up matching more than the ones you married. There was a long silence. And I felt it again, that pull, that undercurrent. We weren't flirting, not really. But there was a warmth there, a comfort. Like rediscovering a language you hadn't spoken in decades, but still remembered fluently. Do you miss him? I asked. Her answer came quickly. The man I married? Yeah. The man he became? Not for a second. I nodded slowly. I keep thinking back, trying to pinpoint where Lisa started fading. Was it when we stopped taking trips? When the kids became the center of everything? Or was it just time? Jake changed the minute his company started treating him like a god, she said, bitterness creeping into her voice. He got addicted to the attention, the power, the way women looked at him. I went from being his partner to being his house manager, his PR assistant, his expected background prop. That's how I feel lately, I admitted. Like wallpaper. We clinked glasses. A sad toast. To the wallpaper club, she said, a faint smile playing at her lips. To the ones who watched it all fall apart in slow motion. Another silence. This one heavier, but not uncomfortable. Do you still love her? She asked softly. I thought about that for a long time. I don't know, I said. I love who she used to be. I love the memories. But lately, I don't even recognize her. It's like she's become someone else. Someone who doesn't see me at all. Same. She reached into her coat and pulled out her phone, scrolling for a second, then turning it so I could see. It was a photo of her and Jake on vacation somewhere tropical. A posed shot. His arm around her waist. Her smile perfect. This was 2 years ago, she said. I remember crying in the hotel bathroom that night because he told me I was boring now. Said I didn't challenge him anymore. My chest tightened. That's brutal. She nodded. And yet, I smiled for the camera. Pretended everything was fine. Posted it to Instagram like I was living the dream. I think I was more in love with the version of our life I sold to other people than the life itself. I knew that feeling. I'd been there. Posting anniversary photos, family selfies, birthday captions full of words like soulmate and forever, all while sleeping back to back and barely speaking between sips of coffee in the morning. We were both actors, experts in public intimacy, strangers in private. We finished our drinks. Then another round. Somewhere between the second and third drink, our story started unraveling further. She told me about the miscarriage 3 years into their marriage. How Jake never grieved. How he called it a setback instead of a loss. I told her about Lisa's panic attacks during her tenure review. How I stayed up for days helping her prep lectures while she tore into me for not understanding the pressure. How she once called me safe, and I didn't know if it was a compliment or a condemnation. We shared everything. The wounds, the quiet betrayals, the loneliness, and with every word, the space between us shrank. By the time the third round was done, I could feel the weight of her knee just barely brushing mine under the table. Not intentional, not pulled away either. Her voice was softer now. It's strange, sitting here with you like this. Feels like it's supposed to be happening. I nodded, like something long overdue. Her eyes held mine for a long time. You ever think about it? She asked. What? If we'd actually done something back then? Prom? After class? All the time. She smiled. Me too. We left the bar just after 10 p.m. The night air had cooled, but neither of us commented on it. We walked together to her car. When we reached it, she stopped, turned, and for a moment, just looked at me. Thank you, she said. For talking. For listening. For not making me feel insane. You're not, I said. You're just hurt. She nodded. Yeah, we both are. Then, in a moment that felt more like instinct than decision, she leaned in. Not a kiss. Not yet. But her forehead touched mine, our breaths mingling. And in that stillness, I felt something shift. Not anger. Not revenge. Just something real. It was a Friday night when the line finally blurred. A week had passed since our meeting at the bar. A week since Lisa's rendezvous and Emily's quiet heartbreak. And in that strange, wounded space we now shared, we had started meeting more frequently. Not in secret, exactly, but not openly either. There were phone calls that lasted too long. Texts that started practical, updates about our spouses, and slowly turned personal. A shared meme, a line from an old song, a photo of coffee mugs clinked together with the caption, "Feels easier with you around." We weren't trying to start something. We were trying not to drown. The meetings continued. Quiet cafes, park benches, once in a bookstore, where we browsed old paperbacks and laughed about how Jake and Lisa would never set foot in a place like that. It wasn't flirtation. Not at first. It was grief, exhaled between two people who knew what it meant to feel invisible. But then came the night at her place. It started with wine. I don't usually drink alone, she'd said, texting me a photo of a half-empty bottle of Cabernet next to a candlelit table. I responded before I could think. Me? Want company? Her reply came seconds later. Emily. Yes. I should have hesitated. Should have told myself it was a bad idea. Instead, I was knocking on her door 20 minutes later, bottle of wine in hand, heart beating like I was 17 again. She opened the door in jeans and a loose off-the-shoulder sweater, her hair tied back, but messy in the way that felt personal. She smelled like vanilla and something floral I couldn't name. Come in, she said, her voice softer than usual. Her house was quiet. Dim lights. Jazz playing low from a Bluetooth speaker. 2 glasses already set out. This feels dangerously close to a date, I joked, trying to ease the tension that buzzed in the air like static. She gave a small smile. I didn't plan it that way, but maybe I did not plan it either. I poured the wine. We settled on the couch, facing each other, legs curled up, like 2 old friends who'd been dancing around something too big to name. I talked to Jake, she said after a long sip. Finally. What happened? He admitted it. Well, most of it. Swore they didn't sleep together. Swore it was just nostalgia and texting, and she waved her hand like the words tasted foul. Said I was being too sensitive. I shook my head. Lisa didn't admit anything. Just came home that night like she'd been at school late. Kissed me on the cheek and asked what I wanted for dinner. Emily closed her eyes. God, how do they do that? I don't know, but I can't stop seeing it. Every time she laughs at her phone now, I flinch, like I'm waiting for a knife. She opened her eyes again, looking at me. You ever think about just leaving? Yeah, I said. More and more. And yet, we stay. Because it's what we've always done. Because we're used to it. Because the version of us in other people's eyes seems too neat to tear down. Emily drained her glass. But we're already broken. The silence stretched. Then she reached forward, touched my hand. It was a light touch, her fingers just resting over mine, but it sent a pulse up my arm like electricity. We didn't speak. Didn't need to. She moved closer. I didn't stop her. Her hand slid to my knee. My breath hitched. I met her eyes, those soft, warm, familiar eyes I'd once dreamed about behind a chemistry book. I'm not doing this for revenge, she whispered. Not anymore. Me neither. And then we kissed. It started slow. Careful. A question and an answer, exchanged between lips and breath. Her mouth tasted like wine and something sweeter. Her fingers moved to my neck, pulling me gently toward her as we deepened the kiss. It didn't feel like anger. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like release. We moved to the bedroom without speaking. Clothes slipped off like promises we no longer needed to keep. Her skin was soft and warm beneath my hands. Her breath caught in her throat when I kissed the curve of her shoulder, and the sound undid me completely. She didn't rush. Neither did I. There was no frantic energy, no reckless clawing. Just two people rediscovering how it felt to be wanted. Touched. Seen. And when we came together, body against body, soul against soul, it wasn't dirty. It was sacred. Afterward, we lay tangled in the sheets, her head on my chest, fingers lazily tracing circles on my skin. I don't feel guilty, she said quietly. Neither do I. Should we? Maybe. But guilt feels like something that only exists when love still does. And I don't know if there's any of that left in what we had. She nodded against me. This didn't feel like cheating. No, I said. This felt like healing. Another pause. You know this changes everything, she said. I know. And I did. Because we hadn't just crossed a line. We'd stepped over it, hand in hand, with eyes wide open. We weren't just reacting to betrayal anymore. We were writing something new. Something raw. Something real. And no matter what came next, divorce, fallout, judgment, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about rediscovery. I hadn't felt that alive in years. Not since before Lisa's subtle withdrawal. Not since before date nights turned into shared glances over takeout containers and conversations devolved into logistics and bills. Whatever that night with Emily was, it hadn't been just sex. It was something that pulled me back to myself. And maybe, just maybe, to the boy I used to be. The next morning, I woke to sunlight warming the sheets, Emily's bare shoulder rising and falling softly with each breath. She lay curled against me, completely still, as if the peace we found in each other could be frozen in place. For a second, I let myself pretend the world outside didn't exist, that there were no spouses, no betrayals, no past to untangle. Just her and us. She stirred eventually, eyes fluttering open, then smiling when she saw me still there. You stayed. Didn't want to leave? Good. We didn't talk much that morning. There was a comfort in the silence that didn't need filling. She made coffee in an old hoodie that hung just below her thighs. We sat on her small balcony, feet bare, mugs warm in hand, the morning breeze carrying the scent of spring rain. I haven't felt this calm in I don't know how long, she admitted, brushing her hair behind her ear. Me neither. Later, we sat on her couch flipping through an old photo album she'd pulled from a drawer. Half the pictures were from high school, locker hallway snapshots, pep rallies, prom night candidates. God, I said, pointing at one of them. Look at your handwriting. On the back of the photo, in looping, swirly penmanship, she'd written, best year ever. Until it wasn't. Emily laughed. That was right before Jake dumped me for a freshman cheerleader. And right before you started dating. What was her name? Lauren. Right, she said. The blonde with the braces. I think she kept those braces way too long. We both laughed. But the warmth stayed. We drove together later that week. Out of the city. No destination. No clock. Just music and the hum of the road beneath us. Somewhere around mile 38, she reached over, and rested her hand on mine. That one small gesture said more than either of us had been able to put into words. We stopped in our old hometown, Ridgeview. It had barely changed. Same rusty welcome sign. Same gas station with the world's slowest pumps. We parked behind the high school and just sat there for a while, watching the sun go down over the football field. "This feels surreal," she whispered. "Like ghosts of our younger selves are still walking these halls," I said. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Do you think they'd be proud of us? Or horrified?" "Probably both." We walked the track later, the air cooling, dusk softening everything around us. We talked about the first time we met, how we both remembered it differently. "You say it was in chemistry class," she argued, nudging me playfully. "It was. I swear it was before that. The sophomore dance. You bumped into me and spilled Sprite all over my dress." "Wait, that was you?" She gasped. "You didn't even know? I thought you were someone else." "Well, now I'm hurt." I caught her hand in mine. "Let me make it up to you." We kissed again under the bleachers, like two kids sneaking a moment before curfew. But it wasn't lust that time. It was something gentler, a tenderness that made my chest ache with how simple it all felt. For a moment, time folded in on itself. I was 17. She was 16. And all that mattered was how it felt to hold her. The past became this strange, glowing film we could press play on again. And we did. We spent the next weekend revisiting every old spot that meant something. The movie theater where we almost kissed during The Sixth Sense. The diner with the jukebox still stuck on the same 3 songs. The lake where a bunch of us skipped class one May afternoon senior year. Everywhere we went, it felt like we were stitching something back together. Not a new story. An unfinished one. One that had paused all those years ago because life got in the way. Now, we were pressing resume. We talked deeper, too, about who we'd become. What we gave up. What we thought we wanted. And what we learned wasn't enough. "I always thought marriage was supposed to feel like safety," she told me one night as we lay tangled together on her couch. "But somewhere along the way, it started to feel like a cage." "Same," I said. "Lisa used to make me feel like I could be anything. Then she started needing me to be someone else entirely. And I let it happen." Emily looked up at me. Maybe we both just needed someone to see us again. We made love that night slowly. No rush. No desperation. Just a need to memorize each other, the way our hands fit, the way our bodies moved together like they were designed for it. Afterward, as we lay in the dark, the silence felt different. Not awkward. Not anxious. Just full. I wasn't thinking about Lisa. I wasn't thinking about revenge or betrayal or what came next. I was thinking about Emily's laugh. The way she looked at me like I was whole again. I was thinking about how it felt to be wanted not because I was dependable or consistent or a safe bet, but because I was me. And the crazy part? She made me want to be that version of myself again. Not the bitter, betrayed man I'd become, but the dreamer I used to be. The boy who wrote terrible poetry in his notebook and once believed a kiss behind the bleachers could change everything. Because maybe, just maybe it could. The beginning of the end came on a Tuesday. Lisa was in the kitchen, unloading groceries like nothing in the world had changed. She hummed some pop song under her breath, one I'd heard her playing the week after the reunion. Probably the same one she'd sent to Jake during their flirty message exchanges. I watched her from the hallway, arms crossed, heart hammering. She turned, saw me, and smiled. "Hey, babe, can you help me with the bags?" I walked into the kitchen and said, calmly, "How long were you going to keep lying to me?" The air thickened instantly. She blinked. "What? You heard me." She stared at me, eyes narrowing slightly. "What are you talking about?" I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolled to the screenshots I'd taken from her old iPad weeks ago, and set it on the counter between us. Her smile faded. "You went through my messages?" she said, tone dropping several octaves. Defensive. Cold. "I did," I said, "after you started hiding your phone. Locking it. Laughing at texts you never showed me. Dressing up for tutoring sessions. What did you think was going to happen?" She looked away, jaw tight. "You invaded my privacy. And you destroyed our marriage." The silence hung like a blade between us. "You didn't sleep with him?" I asked. "Tell me that. Right now. Look me in the eye." She did. And she said, "No," but it was too late. Whether or not it was true, I didn't believe her. The betrayal didn't begin between the sheets. It started in her smile. In the winks. The nostalgia. The desire to relive something that no longer belonged to her. "He's married, Lisa." Or did you forget that part too? That got her. Her cheeks flushed. Her arms folded across her chest like a shield. You don't understand, she said. He made me feel seen again. Desired. Do you hear yourself? Don't act like you've been perfect. You haven't touched me in months. Because I could feel you slipping away. We were shouting now. And suddenly I realized this wasn't about Jake. Or even about the affair. This was about years of erosion. Conversations that stopped before they started. Intimacy traded for routine. Quiet dinners where we sat next to each other like strangers in a waiting room. I gave you everything, I said, voice trembling now. Time, loyalty, love, and you threw it away for a fucking high school flashback. She turned away, wiping at her face. And then she said it. The sentence I'll never forget. Maybe we both just needed something different. The room went still. I nodded slowly, heart sinking. I guess we finally agree on something. I walked out, not just from the kitchen, from the life we'd built. Later that night, I got a text from Emily. Emily, he knows. I called her immediately. Jake had come home from a business trip early. She hadn't planned it, but she'd left her phone unlocked on purpose. She wanted him to see the photo. It was one she'd taken of us at the lake. Nothing scandalous. Just me with my arm around her, both of us smiling. Real smiles, not the kind you post for likes. He didn't say a word at first, she told me, voice low, steady. Just stared at it. Then what? He lost it. Accused me of ruining his life. Said I was the hypocrite. That I betrayed him. I laughed bitterly. Of course he did. She continued. Then he asked if I loved you. That made my breath catch. What did you say? She paused. I said I didn't know yet. But I might. A silence passed between us, softer than any before. He'll retaliate, I said. Let him, she replied. He already lost. The next day, it all exploded. Jake texted me directly. Jake, you think this makes you a man? Taking what's mine? I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Me. She was never yours. Just like Lisa was never really mine anymore. His reply came instantly. Jake, you're dead to me. I smiled. Me. Already was. Word spread fast. Lisa told her sister. Her sister told mutual friends. Within 48 hours, our social circles lit up with whispered shock and gleeful drama. People picked sides. Some said Emily and I were just as bad. Others called it poetic justice. One mutual friend texted me late at night. Friend, I don't know how this ends, but part of me is glad someone finally took the mask off both of them. It wasn't the comfort I needed, but it was something. Emily and I laid low for a while. We didn't rush. We didn't gloat. We met for coffee, took walks. Sometimes we just sat in the car, parked by the lake, saying nothing. I keep thinking they'll show up, she said once, half laughing. Jake with some over-the-top speech. Lisa with her guilt eyes. Let them, I said. We already said everything we needed to. And it was true. There were no more confrontations needed. We'd pulled the curtain back. We'd chosen ourselves. And in doing so, we found each other. Not as pawns. Not as a plot twist. But as two people who knew what it meant to be broken. And who, just maybe, were starting to put the pieces back together. Fallout has a rhythm. It doesn't explode all at once. It trickles, like water through a cracked ceiling, slow at first, then faster until the whole room is soaked. And once it starts, you either brace for it or drown. I braced. Lisa moved out 2 weeks after our final confrontation. She took a suitcase, a few boxes, and the framed wedding photo from the hallway. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. She didn't cry. Neither did I. Her parents reached out to me the next day, awkward and cautious. Her father said he was disappointed in both of us, but confessed, not so quietly, that he'd seen the change in her long before I had. It was like she got bored, he told me over coffee. And Lisa? She doesn't do boredom. She runs from it. I didn't defend her. Emily's life unraveled in parallel. Jake moved into a condo downtown and immediately changed his Facebook status to single, followed by an album titled New Beginnings that featured gym selfies and overpriced cocktails. Emily laughed when she showed me. Nothing says recovery like 6 pictures of a man flexing in front of a mirror, she said. Midlife crisis. Activated, I replied. The gossip train hit full speed in our mutual social circles. Friends, family, people from high school we hadn't spoken to in years started sending curious messages, some supportive, others veiled in judgment. One night, I got a message from a guy I barely knew in college. Derek, dude, Are you the guy who stole Jake Mercer's wife? I stared at it for a second and replied, Me? No. I'm the guy who helped her realize she wasn't property. Derek never wrote back. People took sides. Some friends distanced themselves from both Lisa and me, unsure of how to handle it. Others came out of nowhere with their own quiet confessions. I went through the same thing. One woman told me at a dinner party. It's weird, right? How infidelity becomes everyone's dirty little mirror. I nodded. It was weird. Everyone suddenly had a story. Emily and I stayed out of the noise. We weren't flaunting anything. No public posts. No declarations. No couple selfies with dramatic captions. We didn't need it. But there was guilt. Even when you're the one betrayed, even when you find something genuine afterward, guilt clings to the edges. Like residue. Like smoke. One night, we sat on my couch, both of us quiet, a movie playing low in the background. You ever think we're just escape pods? Emily asked. I glanced at her. You mean for each other? She nodded. Two people who got blown out of the same wreckage. Holding on because we don't know what else to do. I thought about it. The question wasn't unfair. I think about it, I admitted. But then I remember how I felt the night we kissed. And how I feel when you laugh. And I know it's more than that. She looked down at her hands, then back at me. But what if this thing we're building is just survival? I reached out, took her hand. Then it's the best survival I've ever known. There was a long pause. Then she said, I want it to be real. It is real. It had to be. And yet, doubt lingered. Lisa and Jake didn't go quietly. Both sent final parting shots. Lisa emailed me a list of things she still wanted from the house, most of which were symbolic rather than practical. The tea kettle, she wrote. The one we bought in Asheville. I want it. I let her have it. Jake tried to twist the knife in his own way. I heard from a mutual friend that he was telling people Emily had always been emotionally fragile, that she latched onto the first guy who gave her attention. I didn't respond. But Emily, when she heard, just laughed. Emotionally fragile, she said. Coming from a man who bought a sports car and started dating a 25-year-old yoga instructor the same week he moved out. Touché. Still, the judgment came. Some people we trusted looked at us differently. Like we were complicit in our own destruction. Like we should have been better. Stronger. More forgiving. But here's what they didn't understand. Sometimes survival looks like betrayal to those who've never bled. Sometimes falling into someone's arms isn't running away. It's the only way to keep standing. Emily and I weren't pretending to be perfect. We didn't wear our story like a badge. We carried it like a scar. Quietly. Carefully. But we carried it together. And there was healing in that. We started to do normal things. Grocery shopping. Cooking together. Watching bad reality shows on the couch. Laughing over takeout when I burned the pasta. It was simple, mundane, and completely ours. One weekend, we took a trip to the mountains. A small cabin. Just the two of us. No phones. No social media. No ghosts. We hiked. Sat by the fire. Read each other pages from the books we loved as teenagers. She brought her old notebook. Yes, the one she used to scribble lyrics in during high school. I found it when I was packing up, she said. It felt wrong to throw it away. So we read it. Some of it was cringeworthy. Some surprisingly good. One page in particular stopped me cold. It read, If I ever get the chance to love without fear, I'll love like fire. Fast, wild, and warm. I looked up at her. That's beautiful, I said. She smiled shyly. I wrote that the week after prom. You were supposed to ask me, remember? I do now. We didn't speak for a while after that. We didn't have to. The past was still with us. But the present was ours. It's funny how love can return in whispers. Not grand gestures. Not fireworks. Just small, quiet moments that settle into your chest and refuse to leave. That's how it felt with Emily. Not a blaze, but a steady warmth. And in that warmth, something impossible started to bloom. Hope. We were both finalizing divorces. The paperwork was slow, and the emotions slower. Even after the betrayals, there were lingering pieces to sever. Bank accounts, insurance, shared belongings, holiday traditions that would never return. Lisa and I kept things civil. She hired a mediator. We divided the assets like business partners liquidating a company. There were no final I love yous. No pleas to fix what was broken. Just dry signatures and cool nods. Emily's split from Jake was Messier. He tried guilt, then charm, then threats. He's trying to scare me into staying, she said one night, eyes heavy. told me I'd regret throwing away a solid man for a fling. I held her hand and said the only thing that mattered. You didn't throw away anything. You took your life back. She smiled then, just barely, but it was enough. Still, something had shifted in her. She was quieter, more careful, like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I felt it too. The fear, the doubt. Was this real? Or was it just two people using each other to escape the wreckage? I started pulling back. Not on purpose. It was subtle. I skipped a dinner we'd planned because of work. Took a long weekend alone in the city to clear my head. When I got back, her smile didn't reach her eyes. We okay? She asked. I nodded too quickly. Yeah, just. A lot on my mind. She didn't press, but the distance grew, and that scared me more than anything. We'd survived so much, betrayal, heartbreak, shame, and yet now, when things were good, I was the one retreating. Why? Because I was terrified that if I gave her everything, she'd leave too. Because I still didn't trust good things to stay. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning. We were at a farmer's market, walking past a vendor selling old vinyl records. She picked up a Fleetwood Mac album and smiled. You know this one? I nodded. My mom used to play it when she cleaned. I used to dance to it in my bedroom, barefoot, eyes closed, pretending I was Stevie Nicks. Did you wear flowy skirts and spin around? Every time. She handed it to me. You should take it. I hesitated. You love it. I want you to have it. That's when I saw it, something in her eyes. A quiet offer. Not just the record, but her. All of her. And I panicked. I smiled, kissed her cheek, and said, thanks. But I didn't take it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the look on her face when I walked away from that booth. She hadn't said anything, but I could feel it, something closing. The next morning, I found her sitting on a bench outside her apartment, sipping coffee, wearing that same Fleetwood Mac shirt I remembered from high school. She didn't smile when she saw me. I've been thinking, she said. Me too. She looked down at her hands. We've come a long way, but I need to know, are we building something? Or are we just hiding in each other? I don't know, I said honestly. Some days, it feels like one. Some days, the other. She nodded slowly. It's okay not to know. But we can't stay in limbo forever. She was right. I spent the next few days alone. Really alone. I took long walks. Sat in silence. Read old journal entries. Revisited texts from Lisa, both beautiful and brutal. I stared at pictures of myself from 10 years ago and barely recognized the man. And I asked myself the hardest question of all. Do I want to heal? Or just feel wanted? The answer came quietly, like the whisper of a breeze through an open window. I wanted her. Not as a salve. Not as a shield. But as a partner. Not because she'd saved me, but because she saw me. That Friday, I went back to the record vendor. The Fleetwood Mac album was still there, tucked behind a stack of old jazz covers. I bought it. Wrapped it. Wrote a note. Later that night, I showed up at her door. She opened it slowly, eyes cautious, lips tight. I owe you an answer, I said. She didn't speak, just waited. I held out the wrapped package. Open it. She peeled back the paper. When she saw the album, her breath caught. Then she saw the note tucked inside. In my handwriting. I want to spin with you. Barefoot. Eyes closed. Every damn day. She looked up, eyes wet. I'm in, I said. No more fear. No more halfway. I want this, whatever it becomes. She stepped into me, wrapped her arms around my waist, and whispered, me too. We danced that night. Not in a bar. Not in a bedroom. In her living room, barefoot on the wooden floor, the record spinning in the background. No words. Just the music, and our laughter, and the quiet knowledge that we were done running. I didn't know what the future would look like. I didn't know if our scars would ever fully fade. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was love. They say you don't really notice the moment your life changes. You just look back and realize everything before it belonged to someone else. That's how it feels now. Looking back, I see a man who clung to the idea of stability like a raft, who mistook routine for love, who kept reaching for someone already walking away. That man was me, until I let go. Now, every morning I wake up beside Emily. I don't feel like I've stolen something. I feel like I've come home. It wasn't easy getting here. The divorce finalized in late spring. The paper came in the mail with Lisa's signature in faint blue ink at the bottom. Just a single envelope, anticlimactic in every way. No ceremony. No last confrontation. Just legal punctuation on a life that had quietly ended months earlier. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate, either. I just sat at the kitchen table with the letter open and whispered, "Okay." Emily's came through the week after. Hers was messier. Jake tried to stall, claiming emotional distress, demanding property he barely cared about. But she got through it. Stronger, sharper, quieter, maybe, but more herself than ever. One morning, I found her in the kitchen barefoot in one of my old t-shirts, holding a cup of coffee and staring out the window. The sun caught the side of her face, and for a moment, she looked younger, happier, whole. I walked up behind her, wrapped my arms around her waist, and kissed the back of her neck. "Hey," I whispered. She leaned back into me. "It's over." And it was. The legal ties, the guilt, the questioning, all of it done. Now it was just us. We took things slow even then. We didn't rush into moving in together. No dramatic merging of lives. No rings. No new furniture. Just time. Time to relearn how to be loved and how to give it without fear. Sometimes we still caught ourselves flinching. A certain phrase. A silence at dinner. An unlocked phone left face down. Ghosts have a way of showing up in small things. But when they did, we talked. We didn't pretend the past hadn't happened. We used it as foundation. I remember one night we lay in bed and Emily whispered, "Do you think we're just a beautiful mistake?" I turned to her and said, "No. I think we're what was supposed to happen, just out of order." She smiled, kissed me slow. "I like that." We took our first trip together in the summer. A week in Maine, seaside cabin, crashing waves, endless blue. We hiked cliffs and read books on the porch and made love to the sound of gulls and wind. There was a moment, sunset, the sky bleeding orange over the water, where I looked at her and thought, this is it. Not the passion, though that was still there. Not the novelty, but the peace. Being with her felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. The world didn't stop for us. People still talked. Lisa went on to date a man 10 years younger, an entrepreneur who sold artisanal honey. Jake rebounded with a woman who called herself a healing energy consultant. We didn't follow their lives closely, but once in a while, gossip trickled in. It didn't matter. We weren't part of their story anymore. We had our own now. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had asked Emily to prom all those years ago. If I'd passed her a note in class. If we'd gone out for coffee instead of drifting into other arms. Would we have ended up here anyway? Or did we need the pain? Did we need to be broken first to recognize the real thing? It's hard to say, but I do know this. What Lisa had with Jake, that was nostalgia. A flash of youth. A flirtation with a version of herself she missed. What I found with Emily wasn't nostalgia. It was destiny. Not perfect, not easy, but earned. Forged in fire and heartbreak and choice. People often ask if I'm bitter about the affair. The truth? I'm not. Because if Lisa hadn't betrayed me, I might still be pretending. Still lying to myself about what love was supposed to look like. Still clinging to a relationship that ended long before either of us admitted it. Still playing the role of husband, instead of becoming a man who could love and be loved fully. I don't wish Lisa well or ill. I just wish her gone. And she is. Emily, though, she's more than here. She's my best friend. My second chance. My actual first love. And I'm not letting go this time. The other night, we sat on our porch, a blanket around our shoulders, wine glasses half full. Fleetwood Mac played softly through a Bluetooth speaker. Landslide, her favorite. She turned to me, eyes full of something soft and wide and real. "I never thought I'd be happy again," she said. "Me neither." And now, I reached for her hand, kissed her fingers. Now I'm sure we were always meant to find our way back. She rested her head on my shoulder. No words followed. None were needed. Because some love stories don't begin when you're young. They begin when you're ready. And this time, we were.